In the words of the great American poet, Nellie, it's getting hot in here.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. Welcome to 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. It is, after much discussion, we've decided 77 days until the election. Today, my guest is Josh Gondelman. He is a writer and comedian and famously a non-user of cocaine. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for getting all my most important credits in there.
I want to talk to you about politics, which I know is not like your primary area of expertise, right?
It's certainly something I think about and feel bad about all the time. So it's on top of mind.
And talk about and make jokes about.
Yeah.
But actually, there is a part of this that is your area of expertise, which is unions.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you are involved in, actually.
Yes, that is an area of personal investment and pride for me. I am a council member of the WGAE, the Writers Guild of America East Chapter Union. I was pretty neck deep in the strike efforts last year, which was a really fascinating time and really difficult time in a lot of ways, but really wonderful to see so many people pulling together for the same cause.
And that's irrelevant to our discussion today because last night was the first night of the Democratic National Convention. Mm-hmm. And unions have been a huge part of Democratic politics since the beginning of the party, basically. The Democratic machine in many cities relied on unions. What's interesting to me, or notable to me, as a Gen Xer, I grew up with this idea that unions were like kind of corrupt. I mean, they're good, I guess, but that but that they were kind of a necessary, I don't know, not evil, but it just kind of like something for old white guys, basically. And what happened at the Democratic National Convention last night was Sean Fain got out and did a Hulk Hogan kind of to enormous applause. I am blanking on his exact, he is head of
UAW, United Auto Workers, and
rips off, jacket to show a red T-shirt that says Trump is a scab, vote Harris. The theatricality of that, and then the immediate grasping of it by the youngs and the terminally online of like, I gotta get that shirt. Yeah. Everyone's gotta get that shirt. I don't remember unions being like that in previous years.
Well, I mean, like, I think all the negative things that people have with all those negative associations you mentioned, I think people are starting to realize that like corporate interests, everything that you might go, oh, there's corruption or blah, it's so much worse with giant corporate interests, right? Like that's, so I think that is the feeling that like a union is all that stands between the whims of whatever corporation, whether it's Ford or Microsoft or Starbucks, is like a real thing that people are starting to feel, where it's such a low point for union density, but it seems like there's enthusiasm coming together in all kinds of work sectors. And I think that's so cool to see people realizing like, oh, from television writers to auto workers to food service employees, like we're all in the same fight. It's not just like writers, like last summer wasn't just writers versus producers. It was like labor versus management.
Yeah. And I think we need to give a lot of credit to people who have been organizing on the ground for decades and decades and decades and who weren't that stereotype that I'm talking about. And in fact, like I was a grad student in the 90s when grad students were starting to organize. So I know and knew that union organizing was an important part of American history. Mm-hmm. It's not just an important part of like Democratic Party politics. It is something that has been a part that people have fought and literally died for.
Yeah.
Much like it's the same thing as voting. It is that precious a thing to be able to do, to be able to organize. And I think it just seems like it was slow change. Then you had like the Fight for 15. You had this organization of food service workers that I think a lot of young people did see working in food service.
Yeah.
But a lot of pushback on that. Well, that's just making things more expensive. And I think in a weird way, like the writer's strike was this inflection point for people's understanding. Now, that unions were not just about like a particular, you're right, like that weren't just a particular class of people getting help. Mm-hmm. But it was this very public and very well-supported thing. And you saw people talking about it with pride. And what did that, what was the discussion among the Writers Guild people? Was there a feeling like we have to play this right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to like speak about it, about the strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike, right? That was largely concurrent, and there was a lot of SAG-AFTRA support even before the members were on strike. I think there's a lot of talk about like, how do we talk about this issue that we're facing in a way that connects to issues a lot of other people are facing. Like I'm so in the bag. My friends Hamilton Nolan and Kim Kelly have both written like great books. Like Kim about the history of labor organizing in America called Fight Like Hell, and Hamilton's is called The Hammer. And it's like extremely relevant to this discussion about using union organizing as a political tool, right? So it's like he writes chapters about in-home child care providers unionizing in California and basically lobbying before they were a union to make it legal for all this constellation of people who work on their own to bargain collectively, and restaurant workers in Las Vegas, which is like such a service industry driven, hospitality driven town. And so like it's all kinds of people, but we had the true luxury of like our strike being represented by at times people who host and star in TV shows, like familiar famous faces, and like someone like Adam Conover, who was just like really in the trenches and really making videos from the picket lines and really explaining things to people in a way that is like, it almost like his career was marathon training for that moment of like, I'm actually like, Adam ruins the AMPTP bargaining arguments, which I thought was so wonderful.
Yeah, and I think it was. I want to be very careful because as we're talking about it, I'm aware that what happened with the WGA strike is you also did have some good-looking white people on picket lines, right?
But good-looking people of all stripes, I think.
Yeah. Although, again, and let's not be too, I mean, there were writers too. So good-looking people and writers.
Yeah. I mean, you see what I look like if you're watching this on YouTube. I feel like I'm a creative player, writer in a lot of ways.
I also feel like it was an education for people about the ways that these things cut into personal life, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, we can't have our shows, but like, oh, these are real people that create things that we then enjoy. Yeah. And that it is our benefit for them to be well paid and well taken care of.
And I think it's people in the industry that I work in face a lot of similar issues to people across industries, right? Like jobs not lasting a long time and having volatility and that kind of thing, I think really speaks to people. Employers looking for fewer people to do more work. The fight against AI was a real rallying point for people. I thought that was like a really, there are just so many points. And I think one notable thing was it felt different to me as someone who in 2007, during the previous writer's strike, was just an enjoyer of television and film, and someone who writes for television now. It felt so different, partly because I was on the inside of it, but partly because there's just been a sea change in the kinds of social media that people speak directly to an audience instead of having to go through necessarily a legacy media publication who might be sympathetic. And often there's great coverage, but also might not. And so people were speaking directly to their audiences in a way that was like really meaningful. And you're like, oh, this is to me the argument for social media, versus the numerous arguments against it, which are it's corroding our brains like pouring acid on a marshmallow.
And as we're talking, I'm also just thinking about all the solidarity points that people are seeing, the ways that the billionaire class is just the distance between people and the billionaire class, how great that is, and how the control of, by the billionaires and by private equity, how that affects the way we eat, way what we enjoy, the kind of news we consume, the art or lack of art that we get. This idea, again, it just crystallized with WGA for me. I mean, I sort of got over to the labor side pretty quick, but that your art is bad. You person sitting over there on this side of other side of the computer, you have to consume bad art, bad food, bad roads, bad libraries because we don't have better unions. Like that is stronger unions would protect you from
and
that.
like private equity and that kind of like buying stuff up as an asset rather than like a company that creates something that people want and will pay money for goes as far as like Boeing, right? Who seems to have like dismantled the quality control. And so like the same forces that are trying to make like AI TV shows and want to make people who work at Starbucks not receive a living wage for their work are also the people who are like, it's fine if like sometimes a plane just falls out of the sky, right? Like most planes don't.
And I think that there's actually really a good pivot here to talking more about the convention, which is the fact that solidarity can be joyful, that solidarity is actually how we bring more human spirit to bear in our politics.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Like, I don't think organizing has to be grim, right? Like, even when I think there's a line to walk between acknowledging the gravity of the stakes of any, organizing campaign and really investing, because what you're trying to do, whether it's union organizing or grassroots political organizing or whatever, is to like make people's lives better, right? And I think that's like a really beautiful goal through that solidarity, is to come together to offer your support for others. I think that's like it's the best thing that people do.
It's the best thing for people. Like it is just, it's what makes being a person worthwhile.
Yeah, totally.
I'm online. I'm like an online person. So I was watching chatter about the DNC and there was on Blue Sky, which is where I am personally now, mostly Blue Sky and Instagram.
I've been saying Blueski like it was a Polish guy.
Like it was a beer.
Yeah.
But, or if it was made in Milwaukee, right?
That's right.
Like
That's
beer.
Perfect. I think they should come out with one. BLUESKI. Blue Sky, the beer.
If only it wasn't federated and that there was just one person controlling the whole thing, they could like demand that be said that way, right?
That's like how Norm ordered a beer on Cheers, right? Like you ever watch, it happens a little less now, I feel like, just because everything is like sponsored content, but you're watching a movie and someone's just like, one beer. And you're like, what establishment have you ever gone to that's an order you can make? Like truly, if I went into any bar within a 10-mile radius of my home and was like, I'll take a beer, please, like 50% of bartenders would be like, this fucking guy.
Well, do you live in Brooklyn? Because that's like...
Right. So there's maybe a more extensive menu than many places. We challenge rival Portland, Oregon for beer varietals, but like still, I think it's like...
I'll take a whiskey neat. That can't say that either. That
totally.
Do we have the brand neat? Let me check.
But at least there's like a default whiskey. We're so off topic, but there's like a default. You go anything specific, and they have their go-to whiskey. If you go, no, whatever's handy. If you're like, I'd like a beer, please. There is no default option. There's no like Kirkland brand beer that they're gonna serve you.
We could go way down this road and talk about how in the South everything's a Coke.
Everything's a Coke, right? God, like, incredible branding by Coca-Cola.
Like I remember when I moved to Nebraska from growing up here as a kid, I asked for a Coke at a restaurant and they're like, okay. And I'm like, don't you know what kind of Coke? Like, don't you know?
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. Cause that's just the soda umbrella word. I love that.
But we're going to move on talking about the DNC some more.
Talking about, yes.
DNC. Because one person I saw that was like, oh, this is great. It feels like so organically, joyful and high spirited. And it's because they're not afraid anymore and they're going ahead and calling Trump a loser and a scab and all that. And I'm like, I don't think that's it.
What is your umbrella hypothesis?
It has a little to do with the whole they're weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's happening now is the Democrats have finally realized that the way to activate people is not like, democracy may die, but like, look at those weirdos who are trying to kill democracy. Come on. Like, let's put on a show. Let's start a baseball team, and play the rich kids in the camp on the other side of the lake. Like this is about, yes, they're terrible, the rich kid's dad's father wants to bulldoze Camp, Normal or whatever. Camp, you could probably come up with a name.
No, Camp Normal is good. That does, you know what? Maybe we should start, because that does sound like conversion therapy.
It does. Camp Bluesky. Camp Bluesky.
Sure. That's beautiful. Yeah.
The rich kids, dad wants to bulldoze Camp Bluesky. Let's put together a team and we'll play him for all the marbles, right? And that's what it feels like to me. I mean, that there is some name calling involved, right? Or you don't even call it name calling, because Trump he's technically not a scab unless you consider him a crusty lump of discolored flesh, which I would say.
Right. Physically could be
Physically,
a scab.
he's a scab.
Yeah.
But he's a fraud, a criminal. Like, they are like perverts and weirdos. So I don't feel like that's actually name calling. But it doesn't come from this so much as like, we can do this, guys. Like, let's put on a show or something like that.
I mean, my friend Matt and I text each other. He's a very funny comedian, Matt Bronger, when we get fundraising text that's like, Joe Biden is stuck in a well, and unless you send $9, he's gonna die down there. You're like, what the fuck is this approach? Like, that there must be some efficacy to it. Yeah. Like, there must be something that they've found works, because it's been happening for years. But I do think it has started to feel a little and a little falsely urgent at certain moments.
For me, part of why that stopped working was when Dobbs, overturned Roe, because for years Democrats had fundraised off of, we have to stop them from overturning Roe, and then done the bare minimum to keep that from happening. Right? I'm not going to say they didn't stop. They did literally not stop it, but it was also always this like defensive posture of protecting Roe rather than expanding reproductive freedom.
Yeah.
And that was another thing last night. They had a whole fucking thing about reproductive freedom. Oh my God. People saying the word abortion, like over and over on the stage.
I think
there is someone providing healthcare in a van outside the DNC.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I think to me, that is, other than the kind of general like energy and vigor and acuity points that I think have been talked about enough, I think Vice President Harris's open and like enthusiastic and full-throated support of abortion rights and access, and the way that she talks about it compared to the way President Biden talks about abortion and reproductive health, is like such an improvement. I think that's like a sincere progressive win, and I think it's like something that people can really rally around. It's really cool to see. Like, Biden talks about it like when you make a kid apologize for things. Like, well, just you can have abortion.
Yeah. So that disastrous debate that helped get us where we are today. Sure. I was asked to write a thing about it, and I did. And it's funny because I actually didn't write about how dispirited I felt by his general apparent lack of engagement with his inability
reality.
To kind of be there, right? Yeah. Like what seemed like, and we don't want to diagnose, but what seemed like some mental issue.
He didn't seem to be fast on his feet and processing the debate quickly, certainly.
Right. And that was the thing that, of course, we all had a discussion about, rightly. What's something that's not something you need to make a diagnosis about is when he said, what did he call it? We are against late-term abortions.
Yeah. And
I was like, no, that's how you know he's not engaged with reality.
And when he started talking about we have to support abortion because sometimes people immigrate into the country and commit rape. And it's like, that's not the argument. It's actually, that's two bad arguments rolled into one. And I think that was like really dispiriting for people to hear. And I don't want to, especially as he is not running for president, don't want to bag on like everything President Biden has ever said. And I think like he is, to reach back for a moment, like has done a lot of great stuff for labor with the staffing in the NLRB and the FTC, and being the first president, as he said last night, to appear on a picket line. So like, I do want to give credit where credit's due, but also that was a fucking bummer when he said that, where it's like, that's such to use a Republican talking point to like demonize people who immigrate to America, and then to use that as kind of like a tepid defense of reproductive rights was like, I agree with you. That was like a real red flag moment for his candidacy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You don't have to do arbitrary diagnosis about that. That says he's not currently engaged in politics. He's not engaged with the current moment. Yeah. Like he is having some issues because he's talking like it's still 1992.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. Totally. No, I think that it's like a real improvement. And I think like I've had a real, personally, it's a push and pull because there is so much to be enthusiastic about, but there are also some real like legitimate things that are holding me up, and because we were talking about joy, right? Like you brought up joy, and because I do think like pointing out, yeah, JD Vance seems like a weird loser who like, you're like, oh, he drinks a Diet Mountain Dew and he's like, that maybe that's gonna be racist. Like, no man, you seem like a guy that like exclusively pisses into Mountain Dew bottles. Like that's your vibe, because you like don't want to stop calling teenagers racial slurs while gaming, and like
yeah,
that like that's the energy. And it's like, I don't find actually like so part of my work experience, I worked a long time at Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and John is so rigorous and thoughtful, and the staff there is so rigorous and thoughtful from all ends of the office about how they compose these like political comedy pieces that make these really thorough, detailed arguments. And then for several years afterwards, I worked for Jesus and Marrow, who straight up do not do that. And they really shoot from the hip with like, that guy seems fucking weird. And like, I think there is utility in both of those techniques, but I think it is like heartening to see big picture the response to like someone like JD Vance talking about childless cat ladies and a postmenopausal woman's use in society is to just be like, shut up, you fucking loser. You are such a little chode, and you grew a beard because you couldn't be the first chinless president. And like, that's it. Like, it is totally in bounds to just like, you are a creep and a loser, and that's fine to say, especially when it is paired with like talking about real policy differences and how as president you would make people's lives better. But I don't have to say that because I'm just a guy that thinks he's a weird loser.
And I also think that we cannot forget that almost any time you make fun of a Republican, you are, as they say in comedy, punching up, right? Like, they control so goddamn much, right? Yes, Democrats are in the White House. Great. You know? And there is like a very sort of unsteady, you know, jostling for control of the House and the Senate. Like, I mean, it's you can't point at being like having full majorities in both houses and being president, but they have the Supreme Court and they own a lot of shit, right? Yeah. And they have a stranglehold on policy from having been in the driver's seat for so long previously. And they,
I think corporate, with how much money and lobbying influences politics, I think like people who are rich corporate capitalists tend to lean conservative because that's largely how you get to that place, right? Like there are a few people that are like center left, but you're not going to find like a communist billionaire because that is a contradiction in terms. So there is no balance, right? You find like the Koch brothers lobby to be like, we should be able to like churn up dead people into little chunks if that helps us grow tobacco. And you're like, what? And then there's no one with infinity $1 billion on the other hand just being like, we should just like give people health care the way you get napkins at a McDonald's.
It is such a strange thing that our discourse is so moved so far to the right in general. It's so unlike almost any other country that Republicans think that saying everyone will have health care is like an attack.
Yes.
Like they're like, do you hear what the Democrats are saying? Democrats are saying give everyone health care.
Project 2025, right? They call for the repeal of the Department of Education. Like, they don't think people should have schools. Like, they think the government exists in its current form to like tear itself apart, right? That's like what they're doing. They're like if a guy was like, my purpose is to get as many lice as possible.
I wonder if I actually making fun of JD Vance a little bit.
Sure, love to, always.
Which is like, they calling him chinless. True. But here's where I start to feel like there's a part of JD Vance that I don't like making fun of, which is the nerdy part, right? Like, there was that picture of him in a bathroom where he's like kind of goofily standing next to some girls who are pretending to pee at urinals. And I don't know what the attack of that is supposed to be. Like, I don't know if it's like, oh, look, I mean, there is like, well, he's definitely okay with girls being in boys' bathrooms sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think it's that, like, and the same with him in drag when he was in law school, right? Where it's just like these things that he is staking out his cultural positions being like dead set against. It's like, okay when he does it. And that is like such hog shit.
Right.
And it's such hypocrisy, and it's hypocrisy in a way that, like, I think the point, I'm having worked in political comedy for a long time, I am a little exhausted of being like, he said this, but he did that. But I think a picture of this guy being like, trans people are groomers and drag queens are corrupting our youth, to be like, well, then what the fuck are you, man? Like, it's not like, you're not doing it in like a cool conservative way. You're doing the exact same thing. And it's like, it's beautiful to be an out transgender person. And it's like a wonderful artistic expression to do drag. And you're not doing it in some like special different way that makes it okay in your dog shit code of ethics.
And what I want to say is that both that picture and him in drag and even the couch fucking.
Yep.
I would like him more. Like I've said, if he actually did fuck the couch, I think that would make him endearing. Like, I know that sounds funny.
No. But I understand what you mean. But like if
he was just a weirdo who'd done this, like, I actually kind of believe that it was in his book, because it's sort of like a thing you would put in a really personal memoir.
For sure.
Especially in a memoir that was kind of about how you came from this like degraded culture, which I don't think that Appalachia's degraded or anything, right?
I love that being a stereotype, though. Like, you know, in that region of America and kind of the Blue Hills, where you just don't see a person for a long time, and you make love to your couch because that's your fabric wife.
To me, like, it is like you're just a little only child being raised by your grandmother. Like, it could be in a certain kind of memoir, like a David Foster Wallace memoir.
Absolutely.
Like, it could be this thing about like, that's how weird things were for me. That's how much I didn't get socialized, you know?
Totally.
And I would kind of appreciate it. And the same with like that picture in the boys' bathroom with the girls. I was like, I knew that kid.
Sure.
I knew that kid, that he looked like that, and who had a smile like that, and who was goofy like that. And that guy, I won't say his name, but this guy kind of looked like him. He was on my debate team. He was so cool and had this hilarious, you know, sense of humor. And even the drag thing, I like that, JD.
Sure.
You know, I like the guy that did that stuff or who didn't do that one thing.
And I think that is those pictures aren't to be like, look at this guy being a creep. It's to say like, look at who this person used to be or used to say they were, right? Someone who was like, okay with the things that he's now like, this is tearing the fabric of American society apart. And it's like, it just is such a posturing, and it's, I hesitate to use culture war as a term, because I think it is really ruthless and has really terrible outcomes for people, you know? So it's not just like, should there be rainbow beer bottles during Pride? And it's like, well, that's like a cultural issue. Like, but gay people, trans people exist and should be allowed to exist peacefully and happily. And that's not, to me, like a frivolous issue, you know?
And I actually wanted to go back to reproductive healthcare
Please.
For a second, and even LGBTQ stuff, which is that, again, I want to acknowledge the decades of work being done by activists on the ground, even pushing the very phrase reproductive freedom and reproductive justice, like pushing and pushing and pushing more mainstream liberals and progressives to like use that kind of term, and to be inclusive without questions. Like to have just like, no, we're going to be inclusive and not even ask, like not have any limits on being one type of gay person or another type of gay person. Like, that is what we're going to do. And I also want to say, it is the people who have had to work the hardest to come in from the margins of society who have been able to sustain joy.
Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful and instructive quality, and something to like take the lead from the people that have the most at risk, right? Like if someone feels like they are at risk and are unable to, and are feeling in a real grim way about things, I don't think it's like super terrific to like lead with joy when they are not, you know what I mean? But I think when there is a community with people who have been treated poorly by society and they are able to maintain that joy through organizing, that is like, you're like, oh, right. It is a reminder that life, the point of life is for life to be good and to make life good for people and to like treat people well and protect the people who are at risk. And I think that's like, that's very helpful to keep in mind.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Josh?
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like I'm such a fucking bummer.
Oh, I thought that just last thing was actually really cool.
Thank you. No, that I don't think is a bummer at
all. The thing you want to talk about more.
Yeah.
You want to end with some bummer stuff.
I'll say this in a way that feels the least bummery as possible, because I know there's been a lot of talk about like the contrast of joy, right? And Vice President Harris's, I think, like real genuine and infectious enthusiasm for the work that she's doing and the idea of campaigning, and like the real fun of like, it reminds me of that great joke from the movie Office Space where like you're talking about staking out like reproductive health and reproductive justice instead of framing things as like pro-choice and pro-life versus the opposite of whatever that is, right? And it's like, well, we get to stake out our ground and it's like that of why would I change my name from also being named Michael Bolton? He's the one who sucks. Is like, that's what I feel like. It's like, why do we have to play by their terms? They're the ones that are bad. Right. But I will say, I think there's been a lot of talk about the contrast between a lot of the joy and enthusiasm, which I think is necessary to sustain a winning presidential campaign, and the protest movement that's going on inside and outside the DNC. I was at
thank you.
Yeah, another bomb demonstration in Brooklyn on Sunday, and it was like really beautiful. And I mean, it's such a fucking human rights tragedy that I think our country is helping to perpetuate. But it was so beautiful to see people coming together and go like, we're from all these different walks of life. We come to this place from different, with different backgrounds, right? Whether it's like people who have relatives in Gaza that they're scared of or who have lost, or Jews who are saying not in my name, or labor organizers. And there was someone from the Association of Legislative Employees, I believe the union is called, that represents legislative staffers across New York. It's like a 400-member union. It's the largest legislative staff union, I think. And so people coming from all these different places to say like, look, and I think something that maybe people are being a little defensive about and missing is that all the speakers that I heard, and I don't think we left a little bit before the end, but all the speakers I heard were saying like, look, this is a chance for the Harris-Walz ticket to really address a major concern that people who are saying, we want to vote for you. We're here saying like, we want you to take this position that means so much to us. And like, we want you to hear your constituents. And I think that's like that's something that maybe people are missing, in that like going, oh, well, if you're protesting, you want Trump to win. I don't think like anyone at that protest wanted Trump to win. And what they were saying is like, this is something like, hear us, there's a lot of pain and that America can take a real step towards stopping. So all that is to say, there's a lot of stuff on this that Vice President Harris, that has expressed with the family leave and like really humane policies towards workers and reproductive health rights and some of the stuff that, Governor has put forth. And so I think like, I really feel a lot of tension between like, because I do think you need to have enthusiasm and joy and excitement to sustain a national campaign. But at the same time, like, I feel strain over it because this is such a devastating issue of our time, that people that like also it's an atrocity, so like I understand both sides of it, where I don't look at people being enthusiastic and going like, how do these idiots not get how bad things are, but I also don't watch this enthusiasm and go like, I can get on this train and I can bring a party hat. And so it's like, I don't know. That's kind of where I am, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think I'm so glad you brought it up because I do think it's important. And I have a couple different thoughts. One
Please.
is that I, as someone who tends to be more leftward of the dial and who feels strongly that there is a genocide happening in Gaza, these are war crimes, and that the U.S. has aided and abetted them and has not done enough to stop them, and that our political leaders have not done enough to express the truth, which is war crimes, it's genocide. That it's been interesting to see organizers, again, so much credit to the organizers on this who organized the uncommitted votes during the primary.
Yeah.
And who saw that as a strategy to say, we want a say in this party. We believe in this fight so much, we are going to take it inside and not take it outside.
Yeah.
We are going to trust that you will hear us if we speak and speak as one voice, and that we want to be a part of this party.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that there's been an interesting tension on the left about that. Like, I definitely have friends who've been like, can't support Democrats, won't vote. And then I have some friends who are like, we can't start at the top with change.
Yeah.
We have to get in and it's not like we have to work from the inside, but more like we have to be a center of gravity.
Right.
Like with reproductive justice and reproductive freedom, like with labor organizing, right?
Yeah.
Like with, chipping away at white supremacy. Like there has to be another center of gravity in the party in order to pull away from the mainstream. And I think, like, I follow Dear White Staffers on Instagram.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And they're both hilarious because it's Dear White Staffers and they have a lot of, make a lot of fun of the whiteness of the party and whatnot. But they've been kind of interestingly walking or staying in a gray area about being excited about the ticket, but also you cannot shut these people up.
Yeah.
Like, we have to hear them out.
I think that is like a real, like, and I also understand the precarity of being a sitting vice president who can only say so much in terms of like breaking from the foreign policy of the sitting president. But the way that a week or so ago, Vice President Harris kind of put down a dissenting voice at an event was like done in a way that, of course, it's very difficult. As a stand-up comedian, I have enormous appreciation.
Yeah, what do you do with
like
hecklers? What's your advice about hecklers? You get that a lot.
I think to be human about it, right? Like, I think, not that she was inhuman, I think that's the wrong way to put it, but to like treat the other person and see their humanity. Because most of the time, people aren't heckling because they're like, fuck you, get off the stage. They're heckling because they have something that they couldn't hold in, usually because of alcohol, but in this case, because of genocide, which is a different thing. But like, you know what I mean? I think this is not a person who showed up to be like, I hate you, you're wrong and bad. Like, this isn't the person who shot a bullet at President Trump, like this is someone who's like, I'm in pain, people are in pain, and like we're begging you to help. And so like I think I understand the difficulty of reacting in the moment, but it does feel like this is something that's not going to go away until we make it go away by changing the policy. And so like I wish she had a more thoughtful in the moment response.
I agree. And my hope is that in some ways, having so much enthusiasm and having a sense of we can do this,
a
sense of possibility,
enables
enables the party to be able to hear.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen. It's not necessarily human nature to be doing so well that you can hear outsiders.
But I think though, that is a point that I hadn't considered, and I'm glad to hear it, right? Because I do think there is the best version of success and prosperity in any field is when it opens you up to doing more for other people. And like, hopefully, I mean, there's been some polling, I don't know, I'm not a pollster myself, but like that in some swing states, I think it was Georgia, Pennsylvania, neither Arizona, I think Arizona, but maybe Nevada, that supporting an arms embargo to Israel is both a moral good and something that voters are more inclined to support a candidate who is in favor of. So like, hopefully, even if it's not just for the humanity of it, the good polling will convince people in positions of power to take the political win that is also the moral win.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how Biden was the one that, almost accidentally changed the Obama stance on same-sex marriage by just kind of blurting it out.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And maybe we could have a similar moment.
I know. Something has to, because again, I don't mean to like let a very powerful person off the hook. And if this was something, because people have said to me, this is the internet. People have gone, well, she can't say
well, everything's the
publicly.
internet.
Yeah, that's true. But this is where people are yelling at me. People are going, she can't say anything publicly. She's working behind the scenes. And I go, look, if behind the scenes she's able to affect this change and take this win, I will give the credit that's due. But because you can't signal publicly that this is what's happening, and I have to go with what information I have. I can't like imagine people having secret better opinions than they're presenting publicly. So like it feels very fraught. And again, like you said, I'm not like the front lines of this. I've been not in the streets as much as I could be, but like I feel this is like such an important issue. And honestly, I brought it up because I really appreciate and trust your ability and precedent in having these kinds of conversations. So I'm very glad to talk to you about it.
What I was saying also about that having a moment like Biden moving the whole fucking White House on same-sex marriage, that I think in some ways it might have to be something like that. Mm-hmm. An unscripted moment, a time in which it is just blurted out, like this is the right thing to do. And because what I think will happen, might be what happened with same-sex marriage, was that all of a sudden we found that wasn't as risky a political position as everyone thought it was.
Yep.
All of a sudden it was like, yeah, I guess, sure. Right. I mean, that sounds terrible to say about this basic human right and seeing someone's ability to be fully part of society. But I mean, I don't think it's as risky as everyone thinks it is.
I agree. And I think there will be a lot of blowback from some sectors. And I think that is like, I get when you're running for president, you're not trying to like shake shit up, but it's like the shit's been shaken. We're shaking the shit right now. It's just like, whose shit are you going to take? You know what I mean? Like, who are you willing to be yelled at by and who are you not willing to be yelled at by? And I think like the idea of how many, talking about the uncommitted voter movement, how many people are saying this is a primary issue for me right now, and how many people are still protesting. Again, it's not like, I mean, there is a lot of anger. I don't want to take words out of people's mouths
right.
as much as I don't want to put words in people's mouths. There is a lot of anger from a lot of people, but I think like the purpose of the movement isn't to throw a middle finger up at whoever is the president. It is to like lobby for real change.
And again, I'm going to try to bring this back, and not to put a smiley face on it.
No, please.
But to say that the one in my personal journey as a human, like part of my expanding the palette of my emotions is to expand it in both directions. Yeah. Right? To expand my capacity for joy and expand my capacity to experience uncomfortable emotions.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful way to put that. Thank you.
And that what's funny is that you can kind of work one to get better at the other.
Yes.
And in fact, it's expanding the capacity for joy, where you kind of realize like, oh, I guess I can do something uncomfortable too.
Right. Like if you know what the best of humanity feels like when you're tapped into it, right? And like what it feels like to do good and to be in community with people, then you can allow yourself to feel grief and anger because you know you're a part of something bigger and you can be a part of that fabric and support, right? And I don't mean that necessarily in like kind of in an especially woo-woo way. I mean like in a very literal way, that it is like a foundational tenet of like being in community with people that are like you, people that you feel are dissimilar from you in a lot of ways. And that's like to feel grief and anger on behalf of people that are not maybe like within your household is like a beautiful thing to do and a good way to live, because also it allows you to feel joy for and with other people too.
Again, not to put a smiley face on it.
No.
But to more like, yeah, I think if this is truly a new direction for the Democratic Party and feeling such a genuine we felt this with Obama, but I actually think with the Obama moment as well, it was so focused on all the good.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That there were a lot of people who had very same kinds of criticisms.
Yeah,
right?
Certainly.
And who weren't always heard. And so maybe this could be a true moment of growth for the spectrum of it's hard to say the feelings of a party or the feelings of a movement.
But the political imagination, certainly, of like, hopefully, I mean, it's so devastating that this is what, like, the ask is so meager on this one issue in terms of like, it feels so sensible to me. But I do think you're right. Like encompassing and this criticism is a moment to kind of expand the political imagination and like of America and what America can stand for.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you, Ana. This was really it was really wonderful and heartening to speak with you today.
I think we got the full palette of human emotions for sure.
Well, I mean, as much as a guy from Boston can express them.
Yeah, you are a comedian.
There are parts of me that I'll never have access to.
Let's bracket that whole like last 20 minutes or so.
Feelings. No, I mean, there's feelings. There's shit that's going to come out of me like DMT when I die, where I'm going to be like, oh, I didn't realize that sadness was in there. I have put that away since I was 10 years old.
But if people want to see you talk about something else besides genocide, where can they find out about that? Unless that's part of your act.
It's not most of it. I am okay. So I have a newsletter called It's joshgondelman.substack.com. It goes out every Monday. It's free. It's full of pep talks and general enthusiasm. It's also all my tour dates are in there. I am going to be real quick coming up. joshgondelman.com also for tour dates, but I'm going to be in Denver in September, as well as a bunch of dates on the Wait, Don't Tell Me stand-up tour in Florida and Atlanta, and then 2 Wait road shows doing the radio tapings, one in Minneapolis next week, one in Kansas City in September, and then it's back. I think it'll be back on the road a bunch. I've got a few real fun shows in the Northeast that are coming up at the end of the year that I don't think I'm publicly allowed to announce yet, but it's going to be with real cool people that I like very much and admire, and I'm like blown away that I get to do like a week and a half of shows with them. So hopefully that gets announced soon.
You're not coming to Austin? Like,
not yet. I want to come back to Austin. I haven't been in a long time. It's been almost 2 years, and I was there on like Christmas Eve weekend or Christmas weekend, I guess. But my hope is to come back soon. I love visiting Austin.
Well, we haven't actually. We've met. We have met. We
met in Minneapolis.
We met in Minneapolis. That's true. Hopefully, we'll be back through Austin again sometime.
Yes.
Thank you for being here again. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox, day 77. I've been talking to Josh Gondelman. You can get the show as a podcast. You can also like and subscribe right here. And we will see you tomorrow. Not you, Josh, but...
No, I'm going to disappear. I'm going off the grid tomorrow.
Okay.
any rights activist, I don't care what field you are in, if you're not in solidarity with people of Gaza and Palestine right now while a genocide is going on, then you are totally bankrupt as a rights activist. You cannot be in favor of your own liberation if you're not in favor of other people's liberation.
I'm all for Kamala Harris going to an abortion clinic or saying that she's for caring about the civilians on the ground in Gaza. The problem is that 50 years of Democratic Party administrations among them, we have still lost ground on our bodily autonomy in this country. So words alone, promises, they're not enough. We need action.
We want to let the Democrats know that their vote is not something that is a given from the people, it's something that is earned. They have to show us that they're here to support our interests and not that of their corporate donors.